Tonight on Primetime Politics, warning signs.
We are focused on ensuring that Canadians continue to have confidence in price stability through this period of global upheaval.
The Bank of Canada drops its benchmark rate as the national economy starts showing signs of weakness. Coming up, we'll examine how Donald Trump's trade war is now having an effect here at home. Also, we'll sit down with the Premier of the Northwest Territories, RJ Simpson, as he looks to secure support for economic projects in the North. And how small nuclear reactors are being touted as sources of energy and an economic future for Canada. We'll speak with Ontario's Minister of Energy. This is Primetime Politics. Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Serapio. Well, the Bank of Canada has cut its benchmark interest rate, cutting 25 basis points and dropping the rate to its lowest level since July of 2022.
At this rate decision, there was a clear consensus to lower the policy rate for the first time since March. We will continue to assess the impacts of tariffs and uncertainty on economic activity and inflation. We are focused on ensuring that Canadians continue to have confidence in price stability through this period of global upheaval. We will support economic growth while ensuring inflation remains well controlled.
Now, while many Canadians will welcome this rate drop, it does indicate some weakness in the Canadian economy. And to talk about this, we're now joined by Pedro Antunes, Chief Economist with the Conference Board of Canada. Pedro, thanks for coming by.
It's a pleasure, always a pleasure.
So, you know, when we talk about a cut in the interest rate, in part it means that the Bank of Canada wants to jumpstart the economy. So where are we as a Canadian economy experiencing weakness right now?
Well, I mean, definitely there's lots of bad news out there. Statistics Canada just told us that the second quarter came in very strongly negative. In fact, at an annual pace of minus 1.6%. So we're declining in the second quarter. It's true that we saw a big surge in exports ahead of the tariffs in the first, so a little bit coming off of that. But it doesn't really look like it's a very good news story for the rest of the year. The third quarter looks like it's going to be flat at best. So there's bad news on just the, essentially the economic activity front. There's also, of course, bad news on the labor front. We've seen in the last month, in August, 66,000 job losses. I think Governor Macklem made reference to these things. What does that mean? Well, it means less wage pressure. So I think there's room here, both in terms of less pressure on inflation and the fact that, essentially the economy is not showing signs of strength at all.
Okay, not showing signs of strength. Does that mean then, to look at it in another lens, that the Trump trade war, the policies that he's been pursuing since the beginning of the year is now coming home to roost?
Oh, definitely. There's no doubt. I mean, certainly we've seen it on the key sectors that have been hit by tariffs, the auto sector, steel and aluminum, forestry products. These sectors are already showing signs of weakness, and we've seen job losses in manufacturing and others. I think the bigger issue, though, is, well, actually, there's two other issues. One is the hit to confidence. The uncertainty around access to the U.S. market is really killing business investment, business confidence and business investment. We're seeing confidence essentially at recession levels. And it's the same on households. They're worried about their financial situation. They're worried about future job prospects. So these things are affecting. So we've got the exports being hit, and now we're seeing the impacts on investment and consumer spending. And lastly, the tariff war that the U.S. government is waging is a tariff war against the rest of the world, and it's hurting the U.S. So when the U.S. economy doesn't do well, of course, it broadens the impact on the rest of our exports. So it's not a good news story, I'm afraid, all around.
Yeah, so as you say, weakened demand here at home, weakened demand for Canadian exports because our number one trade partner still is the United States. I don't know if you agree with this, but it seemed up until this point, what we were talking about was an uneven impact of these tariffs, because certainly when auto sector, steel, aluminum, they were getting hit hard, but it now seems that pain is getting more broadly based. Is that a fair analysis?
I think that's very fair. And, when you look at effective tariffs, Prime Minister Carney was saying that we have the lowest tariff rate in the world, and he's talking about the effective tariff rate, and that's true because much of our products now going to the States are still under CUSMA. They're able to get through the border tariff-free. But those key sectors did get hit. Now we're seeing the broader impacts, as I mentioned, on the investment intentions and the investment decline that we saw in the second quarter. That's very bad news. I can't stress enough our investment. This is private investment that drives essentially future production, future job creation, our productivity. We're at very low levels in comparison to other countries, even before this tariff war. And now we're seeing, yes, certainly not good news, and continued declines in machinery and equipment investment in particular. So. Yeah, again, it's all coming home to hit us now with the tariff war going on.
So I got 2 minutes left, but I do have 2 questions to ask you. So I'm going to ask for quick answers on this one, because first, the national projects that the Carney government is identifying, the government will tell you this is meant to be catalytic in that the money invested is meant to then spur on to other investments. When you talk about weakened investment confidence, are these national projects worthwhile right now?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we're in a really tough situation. I think we can always look to the past and say we could have done things differently, and we should have perhaps done things differently. But going forward, the economy is now weak. We're at pretty much a recession, if not an official one. We're very close to one. This is the time that governments should open their purse strings up. And if we're opening them up in the right areas, things that are going to drive our future production, then I think that's a worthwhile commitment. We also have our NATO commitments, et cetera. So there's a lot of challenges here that we need to deal with. Unfortunately, that comes with a cost, and that's possibly bigger deficits and the debt financing costs, which we need to keep an eye on.
Mm-hmm. Keep an eye on that. Listen, and one last question, because again, this is not over. What are the things that Canadians need to be wary about in the coming months?
Well, I think. Personally, I think the pressures on consumers are not done yet. What's kind of held the economy thus far has been consumer spending. Despite the low confidence, we've been drawing down on our savings. I think going forward, we can't necessarily look at that as an option because a lot of households are still renewing mortgages from back in 2020 and 2021, and so those pressures will still be there. I think what we need to think about, both in terms of monetary and fiscal policy. I think we're going to hear about fiscal policy being expansive. I think we may see monetary policy, in other words, rates continue to come down and perhaps ease that burden. We need, I think, we need to fight this with both policy tools that we have here.
Okay, Pedro, thank you for this. I always appreciate the time.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure.
Well, time now for a look at what else happened in politics today. The U.S. president continued his state visit to the United Kingdom today. Donald Trump greeted by King Charles and Queen Camilla at Windsor Castle. There, Trump laid a wreath at the tomb of Elizabeth II, followed by a state dinner with the royal family. The U.S. president was invited to the U.K. by King Charles back in February in a letter delivered by the British Prime Minister. Trump and Keir Starmer are expected to sign a number of deals tomorrow and will then hold a joint news conference. In Ottawa, the U.S. ambassador raised eyebrows last night with comments on the Canada-U.S. trade relationship and also on the use of the term trade war to describe what is happening.
If Donald Trump was thinking that I gotta fight Canada, all right, I'm in a fight with Canada, I'm on a tough fight, and I want to win, you'd see a whole lot different relationship between the United States and Canada than what you see today. You would not see a country that is having the best trade deal, tariff deal of any country in the world.
Hoekstra also said the U.S. was hoping to strike a larger deal on trade with Canada when the two countries reviewed CUSMA, but now says it is obvious that will not be happening. And today, the finance minister was asked to comment on the American ambassador's remarks. Take a listen to what we heard from Francois-Philippe Champagne.
We've been trading with each other for more than a century, and in fact, we're the two largest trading partners. It is sad, I would say, that our largest trading partner turned its back on Canada, which has led to us having to reassess how we're going to build the economy of the future.
Well, we wanted to take some time to talk about that first tranche of national projects announced last week by the Prime Minister. And when the final 5 were unveiled, none of those projects were in the Northwest Territories. Still, the Territories Premier sounded a positive note. And to talk about that, we're now joined by RJ Simpson, the Premier of the Northwest Territories. Premier, welcome to the studio.
Great to be here.
Okay, let's pick up on this point because these projects were announced a week ago today. You and I have been talking for months now about the projects that you wanted to put forward for your territory. None of them made the final list. So why that positive note?
Well, it's a positive note because we have seen so much interest in the North, so much interest in the Arctic, not just from the rest of the world, which has been happening for a number of years now, but from our own government. And so we have great signals from the Prime Minister and from other ministers and at the staff level about investments that are coming to the territory in terms of national defense and some of these projects that we're bringing forward. And the Arctic Economic and Security Corridor was mentioned in the second tranche of projects, and that is the one that we're advancing as well. So I think I understand this first tranche, what they wanted to do. They wanted to get some things that are close to being completed. They wanted to get them over the finish line, and then look at projects that are going to take a little longer. And our projects, they're not shovel ready tomorrow, and so we don't necessarily need them on the list today. But there's very good signals that they're getting on the list.
Okay, good signals getting on the list. And you talk about things like the Mackenzie Valley Highway, the Tulston Hydro Project, the expansion of that. Again, as you say, the Economic and Security Corridor. Is there a timeline in your mind? Do those need to get going sooner rather than later?
Well, they're all in different stages. So the Mackenzie Valley Highway, which would connect Inuvik, so the Arctic essentially, and the forward operating location of the Canadian Armed Forces up there with the rest of Canada. That one is in environmental assessment right now, and we could have shovels in the ground in 27-28 fiscal year. So that one's moving ahead. Regardless of if we're on a list or not, we are doing that project. Canada has been supportive. We need some commitments of money, but I'm feeling good about that one. So that one is moving forward, and I'm confident about that one. The other projects are in different phases, and I think that the Arctic, or the Economic and Security Corridor, that would begin construction after we're done the Mackenzie Valley Highway. And so that's still a few years off, and there's more work to be done. We've actually gone back to the drawing board in a lot of ways because previous work didn't include the Indigenous peoples whose land that corridor is going to be on. So we've gone back and we've brought them in as proponents. We want them to be the ones advancing this so that they can realize the economic benefits of projects on their land. And similarly, Tulston Hydro work is still being done to advance it. So it's not necessary they're on the list today, but going forward, we'll definitely need a lot of federal support on them, and I'm confident we're going to get it.
As we talk about these national projects, and you know this, right now there is this debate, this concern, because on the one hand, this government says it's going to be more fiscally responsible. On another, they're going to invest. And there have been, and I don't know how strong a voice it is, but there have been voices of people who wonder about these investments in the territories. Your territory, for example, I think has less than 1% of the national population. And some might argue that money is better invested in the South, where there are more people right now feeling economic hardship. What do you say to that type of argument?
Well, that's been the philosophy for Canada's history, essentially. And that's why we don't have the development in the Arctic. That's why we don't have a larger population, and that's why it's not more of an economic engine for the country like it could be. The Southern Canada has benefited from investments when it had a low population. The railroad, east to west, the highway system, the electrical grid that's interconnected across Canada, those were investments that were forward-looking. We need the same type of forward-looking investments in Canada. We have a huge country, and if you look at a map, the highway system, the infrastructure, it's blank in the northern part of the country. That's different from every other circumpolar nation who's made investments in the Arctic. And so by making those investments, we're going to be reaping benefits for Canada because already there's more jobs than people in the Northwest Territories. And so as we build this infrastructure, we get more mines under development and operational. Those are jobs for people from across Canada. Those are revenues for Canadian companies, and that's revenues for the government of Canada as well, who has a stake in our resource regime.
And as you said earlier, that there is this interest, and I've been to a number of security forums where there have been security experts wondering, what investment is Canada making, because you have tracked, I talked about this before, a number of foreign players now in the Arctic.
Well, and that's the thing. If Canada's not interested, a lot of other countries are interested. And so if Canada's not going to make investments, we got to find those investments somewhere. And I'd prefer them to be Canadian investments, Canadian companies, and the government of Canada.
Okay. Premier RJ Simpson, thank you for this. I always appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Well, to the matter of SMRs now, or small modular reactors, nuclear reactors to be exact. Ontario has been a big proponent of the technology, not only the provinces to meet the province's electricity demands, but also as a product that can be exported elsewhere and build Ontario industry. Now, last week, an SMR project at Ontario's Darlington site was named in the Carney government's first tranche of national projects. And to talk about this, we are now joined by Ontario's Energy Minister, Stephen Lecce. Minister, thank you for making the time.
Thank you. Good to be on back.
So as we say, this is about meeting electricity demands, perhaps a new market or new markets for Ontario. And, there are many things that distinguish SMRs from large nuclear reactors that people keep in mind. But the federal government says the technology, and I'm going to get your comment on this, they say the technology and the Darlington project in particular has the potential to position Canada as a global leader in SMRs. How would that positioning benefit Ontario and the Canadian economy?
And I would argue we are there already. We're at the early stages of really flexing our muscle on the global stage when it comes to the first mover's advantage and embracing the fact that Ontario, before the Americans and the British and French and Italians and Japanese, here we are in this country leading the way, building the very first of its kind, a fleet of four. Each of them are 300 megawatts of power. That's 1,200 megawatts in total power for over 1 million people's homes. It's significant. But to the question of how do we export this potential, we have already secured partnership agreements in Alberta, Saskatchewan, and New Brunswick to build SMRs for them. We've also secured agreements with TVA, Tennessee Valley Authority, the largest public utility in America. Not ironically, here we are in Ontario helping to support build-outs of SMRs there. And in Europe, particularly in Eastern Europe, in Poland, in Estonia, nations on the front line of Putin aggression, they want to decouple dependence on natural gas from Russia. They want clean tech options. And here we are building SMRs for them. That means our supply chain benefits. $500 million so far of secured agreements in place, commercial agreements to deliver products and materials. It's a moment of pride because it does allow us to scale with greater ambition and embrace clean nuclear technology that's good for Canada and good for the world.
Mm-hmm. Why SMRs, though, as exportation versus a large nuclear reactor?
Well, I think we need both. I mean, Ontario is anticipating we need 75% more power by 2050. That's 4.5 cities of Toronto we're going to add to the grid. The country, we expect to double our grid power demand by 2050. So there's a great deal of pressure on provinces, territories, and the federal governments to build the generation and the transmission to meet those rising forecasts. So we need the small modular reactors because they are a product, a technology that could be deployed anywhere in some of the most remote parts of Ontario to create localized Indigenous energy supplies for businesses, for industry, for our economy and agriculture. But you are right, that cannot be the only solution to our energy demands. We need to build large scale. And that's why in Ontario, we're embracing an all of the above approach of large scale nuclear, including the refurbishments of every reactor we have at Pickering, Darlington, and Bruce. But we're looking to build net new. And we've actually said to the federal government, look, this investment in the small modular reactor project at Darlington is a good first step. We welcome that support, but it cannot be the end. It has to be the beginning. Because if you want to get to that nation building, that clean energy superpower language and vision the Prime Minister speaks about, all roads lead through large scale nuclear.
Mm-hmm. So the first tranche does include the SMRs, the small modular reactors. As you say, amongst your additional ask is this large reactor at Port Hope, as well as we heard from the Premier, tunneling beneath the 401, arguably North America's busiest highway. Have you had any indication at all from Ottawa that they'd be interested in either one of those large projects?
But the other one I would just add, Michael, that's top of mind is the Ring of Fire. I mean, we realized that in order to realize our potential as energy superpower, we've got to get our the bounty of resources out of the ground. And we've announced a one project, one process legislative framework that is now the law of the land. We're cutting our permitting timelines by 50%. We're going to go from the second slowest in the OECD to among the fastest in the industrialized world. That I think fulfills the vision or the expectation of Canadians that we move with speed and unity to champion our workers and our resources around the world. If we don't, the Chinese are winning, the Russians are winning, and other global adversaries. But to the question on the other projects, what I'd say is they have indicated a meaningful commitments to work with us for the next tranche. I don't want to prejudice any future decisions of the federal government, but our message is, look, we got the SMRs on the first list. That's good, but it's not enough. And so the Ring of Fire, the $1 billion we're asking for the all-season road, the end of the duplicative EA assessments, that's frustrating the Indigenous partners leading that project, in addition to large-scale nuclear, the tunnel, ports, pipelines, things that matter to our economy and our energy security. Those are all items we're going to continue to impress upon the federal government and the Prime Minister that they need to be part of the action plan going forward. Yeah. I would argue we're cautiously optimistic, but there's more work to do.
Well, a lot of things you mentioned there, including EA, environmental assessment, for people who may be outside of the governmental lingo here. But you know, when you talk about environmental assessment, you also mentioned China. Now there's talk about perhaps dropping the tariffs on Chinese EVs. How quickly could the relationship between Ottawa and Queen's Park sour if, for example, those tariffs are dropped, or if, for example, the Port Hope reactor, the 401 tunneling doesn't actually happen as part of these national projects?
You know, maintaining tariffs on Chinese products and EVs is going to help protect 157,000 Canadian workers in this province. So we do feel, the Premier feels strongly, we've got to maintain you know, an element of accountability on the Chinese and keep our economy strong. But to the broader point, nation building is achieved if we leverage the resources, the intellectual property, and the workers of Canada. And we have proven we can build large-scale nuclear on time and on budget. We've proven that we can so far build the SMRs that are adhering to the disciplined timeline of getting them done by year 2029. Like, that's 3 or 4 years ahead of the next major competitor in the UK. So we are demonstrating an element of leadership in the space. We just simply expect the federal governments to work with a greater sense of speed, because the expectations they have set is that big nation building, job creating projects will be in the queue. And so, as I say,
if their definition of that speed and their list of priorities do not match yours, because we've seen right now, you know, this bromance between the Prime Minister and your Premier, if those things don't happen, how quickly can the relationship sour?
Well, I mean, look, I think at the end of the release of their project list, if Ontario does not fare well, then that's a discussion we'll have then. I remain cautiously optimistic the federal government recognizes that 50% of GDP, almost 50%, runs through Ontario. We really are playing an important role, not just for, you know, the interests of Ontario families, but for the national economy. And we're helping to build SMRs and nuclear power and working on processing of our critical minerals with other provinces, taking a Canada First approach to nation building. So, look, we're going to keep them accountable. We have to in this moment. We've got to move with greater speed. We've got to end the duplication. We've got to get on with building. But I also believe when we're up against a common threat, the Premier, I believe, has demonstrated that leading by example starts with working with the duly elected governments of Canada. And I think that is a virtue in this moment. While I appreciate fully, we may need to, you know, step it up at times to keep the pressure on. But right now, we got to fight back with one message and a unified front. And I think Canadians expect that of all governments.
Stephen Lecce, appreciate the time. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Well, before we go this evening, we also want to acknowledge the tributes paid today. Members of Parliament standing to remember 3 of their own former cabinet ministers, all who passed away during the summer break. Andrew Thompson was following the tributes earlier today. Andrew, thank you for being here. You know, we live in this small village when you work in the parliamentary precinct. So when someone passes away, it is profoundly felt, and we got a sense of that today, beginning with the tribute shared about Ken Dryden.
Yeah, exactly. We heard about Ken Dryden as a Hockey Hall of Famer, as an acclaimed author, but we also heard about his time in Parliament and especially as Minister of Social Development. Here's the Prime Minister.
Ken Dryden challenged us to dream big and to be bold for our future. As parliamentarians and as Canadians, let's work towards that future with Ken's values of hard work, of solidarity, and ambition. Few Canadians, Mr. Speaker, have given more or stood taller for our country. Ken Dryden was big Canada. Ken Dryden was best Canada.
And it was Ken Dryden's work on childcare, especially, that drew a lot of attention today in the House.
And also tribute shared for John McCallum, a man who amazingly served 3 prime ministers.
Exactly, and of course later became Canadian ambassador to China. And now current Minister Dominic LeBlanc was actually a longtime friend of John McCallum, and he was remembering especially his time as Minister of Immigration and his role in resettling Syrian refugees.
Mr. Speaker, the scale of the task cannot be understated. It required mobilizing considerable government, local, private sector, and community resources, and John poured his heart and soul into this noble effort.
And we had another human moment from Dominic LeBlanc, because he was actually talking about them being seatmates in the House 25 years ago when they were both just rookies in the House.
Yeah, amazing, 25 years ago. And before we go, Gail Shea, obviously memorialized today as well.
Yeah, now she was PEI's voice at the cabinet table for 7 years. She oversaw fisheries and oceans and national revenue under Stephen Harper's government. Here is what the official opposition leader had to say.
At 4'5", she was a little lady who packed a big punch, Mr. Speaker, and she put her fight to work on behalf of farmers, fish harvesters, workers, and veterans. She was proud of her roots and her commitment to the island that gave her her upbringing, her career, and of course her beloved family.
And Michael, one more sad note to pass along tonight. That's the passing of former Conservative Senator Donald Oliver, the second Black Canadian and the first Black male appointed to sit in the Senate of Canada. He served in the chamber for 23 years.
Andrew, thank you for that. CPAC's Andrew Thompson. And that is our program for this Wednesday evening. I'm Michael Serapio. For everyone here at CPAC, thank you for watching. Primetime Politics is back tomorrow evening. Until then, take care.